Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up Florida. My name is Scott Morgan, Roth the Motor City Mad Mouth. Please be joined by my co-host, Greg Fuchs. Welcome back, Greg.
Glad to be here.
And Madman Mancini, Mark Mancini. We got three M's, Madman Mancini. Or if you want to add his first name, you got four square on the M side. Anyways, welcome back, Mark.
I'll tell you, it's a pleasure. This is the show that's sweeping the country. So if you're doing anything, turn your TVs off and watch this thing and hear us. Fuchs, you and me, my brother.
You bet. Well, I'll tell you, we got a stormy theme tonight. And since we're in hurricane season, it started on June 1st and will end November 30th. We're going to be talking about the enduring Miami Hurricanes. If you wonder what that means, well, we're going to talk about here at the beginning of the show. We're going to talk about three Miami Hurricanes that overcame major injuries in college, had excellent careers. And we're going to lead off with a guy who recently retired named Frank Gore. Gore retired last week, and he actually went out there. He's played for the San Francisco 49ers, Indianapolis Colts, Miami Dolphins, Buffalo Bills, New York Jets. He's a five-time Pro Bowler, and he has the most games ever played by a running back with 241. And when you talk about a guy like him, he retired as a 49er, and he left as the third leading rusher ever in NFL history, ahead of Barry Sanders, with 81 touchdowns, 484 receptions, 3,985 yards. And if that wasn't good enough, he had 18 touchdowns and 39 years of old as well. So the guy could catch the ball, and he could certainly run it. Now, what happened to Frank Gore is he endured two ACL injuries in college. He was a 2005 third-round pick of the San Francisco 49ers, 65th overall. Durability was a question mark, but I'll tell you one thing. Obviously, that didn't prove to be the case, right, Greg Fuchs? Frank Gore is a survivor in every sense of the word.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that jumps out to me when you talk about Frank Gore, as you mentioned, the two ACL injuries, which caused him to miss one season in its entirety. And I think one other year he played 3 games, got hurt in the 4th game. But he was extremely durable in the NFL. Did not miss a whole lot of games. And he was a 3-down running back. I remember his days in San Francisco. And he had, I think his best season in the league was actually his second year, almost 1,700 yards. But incredibly consistent. He had I think it was 11 or 12-year stretch, anywhere from 960 yards to almost 1,700 yards every season. Just a very talented back. Now, if someone asks you, give me the top 3 running backs of all time, Frank Gore is probably rarely going to be mentioned, but he's in the discussion for the top 5 or 10 running backs of all time.
Well, the one thing about Frank Gore is a multi-purpose back. Being a Detroiter like I am, I always wondered what would happen if Barry Sanders could ever catch the football instead of run. Because if you get Barry Sanders out in space, who knows? He can talk about running the races. He could, but Frank Gore could do both. He's a good receiver as well as a running back. Mark Mancini, being on the West Coast like you are, I know that the Rams saw plenty of him, when he played with the 49ers. What's your take on Frank Gore and the career that he had?
Well, I think he had a good career. Longevity comes to mind. I mean, that's the first thing. But would I put him up there with an Earl Campbell? Would I put him up there with an Emmett Smith? Would I put him up there with an Edgerrin James? Those type of, running backs? I don't know. I mean, I think he falls in another tier. One of the best running backs I ever saw, and he was probably my top 2, was Earl Campbell. I mean, that was a bruiser, man. And the only guy that comes close to Earl Campbell and is on that upper echelon of great running backs of that yesteryear would probably be Derrick Henry. That's where I'm looking at. But Frank Gore was, it's one of those guys. It might be one of those things where you look at top left-handers. You look at Frank Gore like you look at Tommy John. He was a good, great left-handed pitcher. But was he a Randy Johnson? Was he a Tom Glavine? No. Just an opinion.
Yeah, but as I have said many times, the best ability is availability. And just think of running backs in the NFL today. Even with the running backs by committee, McCaffrey is hurt. Barkley is hurt. Henry got hurt last year. Frank Gore never got hurt. It's just an amazing. He was sort of almost the Cal Ripken of football.
And not only that, when you look at running backs today, it's not a premium like it once was. Right. When you had the O.J. Andersons and the Rocky Blyers, the Franco Harrises, some of those guys, the Wilbert Montgomerys. Everybody was looking at the running back then. The Jim Browns opened up that train, but now it's kind of like what you look at in baseball. It's, you don't have the Suitors, the Fingers, those kind of guys, the Riveras. It's a bullpen by committee.
Well, it's interesting, though, when you look at where his draft position was. Joe Montana was taken in the third round by the San Francisco 49ers. And now you're looking at Frank Gore, by the way, who was taken in the third round by the 49ers. So you want to talk about the ultimate irony with the same club picking in the third round. I think the 49ers have had pretty good luck with third round. Draft. They do. I mean, Joe Montana, how did he do? Let's win a few Super Bowls. Frank Gore, how did he do? Good running back for a long period of time. So with that said, we're going to go on to another Miami Hurricane, one that I actually got to write a story on many years ago. His name is Jim Kelly, okay? He was promised by Lou Saban they would play quarterback. It was developed by Howard Schnellenberger. Joe Paterno wanted him to be a running back at Penn State, but Jim Kelly said no. He was a Heisman Trophy candidate in 1987, was injured. He had a separated shoulder against Virginia Tech. He impressed a lot of people at his pro day, was drafted by the Buffalo Bills in 1983, round one, pick number 14, decided, I'll wait on my NFL career, no problem. So he played with the Houston Gamblers from 84 to 85, United States Football League. When the USFL went down, guess what? The Buffalo Bills had him from 85 to 86, and he amassed 35,467 yards, took the Bills to a record 4 Super Bowls in a row. And, of course, being the runner-up, and he was a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2002, 5-time Pro Bowler. He's a cancer survivor. And, of course, suffering from jaw cancer. And he was also known for some of his charitable causes as well with his son, Hunter. So, I had a good fortune of talking to Jim Kelly back then, but let's face the reality. The two people that saved Miami Hurricanes football, Greg, you ought to know about it better than anybody. I would say with Howard Schnellenberger and Jim Kelly, because I know that program was in really big trouble, wasn't it, Greg?
Yes, it was. Doing the research for Jim Kelly, a couple of things statistically just amazed me, which, sort of shows how our memories may fade over time. Now, his career at Miami, he didn't start the first half of his freshman year, played his sophomore and junior, then he got hurt early in his senior season. But despite being the quarterback for basically 2.5+ seasons, he only threw 33 touchdown passes in his career on the Canes with 28 interceptions. But I remember him as being an extremely good quarterback. So I don't know if it was just the case of, Mark was talking earlier about being more running back focused, a lot more running the ball, a lot less passing back then. Rules weren't as favorable for the passing game. But it's not like Kelly was stepping back there and winging it 40 times a game in college. I was surprised at how low his stats were actually for a guy who, like you said, was considered to be a Heisman Trophy candidate when he's a senior.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Well, when I look at Jim Kelly, man, this guy was a legend in Buffalo. I thought I saw everything when I saw Joe Ferguson, back then. But, man, when Kelly came aboard and now you look at Josh Allen, kind of built in the same mold, let me tell you something. If he can move and run and everything, he'd outshine a lot of quarterbacks today. The quarterback position today is a complete joke in more ways than one in the NFL. You look at these Zach Wilsons, you look at these Justin Fields. These are 15 minutes of fame type of guys. They don't nurture them. They don't build them up. They don't go through the system. And when you look at Kelly, when you looked at Franz Tarkenton, when you looked at Johnny Unitas, when you looked at these throwbacks, man, even Roger Staubach, I mean, it'd be hard-pressed to find good quarterbacks. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Kelly came out of Western Pennsylvania, too.
Well, he did.
He's a Pittsburgh boy.
I believe.
There's quarterbacks come out of Pittsburgh. They might drive down to Miami, but they come out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, well, I'll never forget the time when the Miami Hurricanes defeated Penn State. Greg, do you remember that game? I think it was a nationally televised game, and it drew a lot of big attention out there as well. I just want to let everybody know that once again, let's fire up Florida. My name is Scott Morgan, North Motor City Madmouth. Please be joined by Greg Fuchs and Madman Mancini. I also want to point out that Fire Up Florida will also be adding a couple of days as well. We're going to be doing Thursday broadcasts as well, a couple times a month, and Fire Up Michigan will also be rotating on Thursday. So you're going to have an opportunity to enjoy all these shows here on Thursdays as well. And also later on tonight, the debut of Fire Up Wisconsin. Candy Ebling, Eric Katz, myself, and Mark Mancini will be a part of that as well. So I know Candy's looking forward to seeing this show debut. She does a wonderful job for the South Florida Tribune, the way she puts all the content up there to the broadcast as well. So, and Eric Katz is a frequent contributor to the 108 Stitches Baseball Talk as well. I should also point out to folks that when you want to find our broadcast, you can actually subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel, and we encourage you to do that. Or you can visit www.southfloridatribune.com and also follow us on Twitter at Tribune South to advertise. Feel free to call us at 954-304-4941. And the audio portion of the show can actually be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. So there's a lot of different ways that you can view it, listen to it. So whether you're in a cab, whether you're in a bus, whether you're in a subway, or whether you're on a train, there's a lot of different ways to do that. So again, really looking forward, Mark, later on tonight for Fire Up Wisconsin, and of course, Fire Up Michigan and Fire Up Florida. We'll be also adding episodes on Thursday night. It'll be a little bit earlier, 7 o'clock Eastern time, and those will run to approximately 8 Eastern time. So go ahead and look for the updates as we go ahead and share them to you. So a little bit of previewing. I'm really looking forward, Mark and Greg, to see what Candy Ebling is like. She did an excellent job there. I know that there's no question that she's been waiting a long time to get this opportunity. So I expect her and Eric to do a great job. Mark, we're going to have to do something we're not used to doing, my friend. We're going to have to just stay in the background and let them run the show. We'll just contribute where we want. And I can guarantee you one thing, I won't lose my voice on Fire Up Wisconsin. What about you,
Well,
Mark?
that's okay. We can rest our vocal cords and still get paid.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm telling you, there's no shortage of broadcasts with Mancini and I. And Greg Fuchs done a pretty darn good job as well, picking up some of the load lately. All right, the third player I want to talk about is
Hey, Scott, let me interrupt for a second. Before we get off Jim Kelly.
Yeah.
When I was doing research thing, if you were to ask me, Greg, name some of the top 5 or 6 offenses in the history of the NFL, I would have picked the Bills teams with Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed. They went with the no huddle. And it seems to me the Bills were just scoring 40 points a game, and Kelly was just winging it downfield. When I looked up his stats, I thought, is there another Jim Kelly? Am I looking up the wrong Jim Kelly? Like you mentioned, he threw for 35,000 yards. You know how many yards Marino threw for? And they were same era, 61,000 yards Marino threw for.
Yeah, well, let me point out
20 touchdowns versus 237. Now I'm going, what am I not remembering correctly about the Bills offense?
Let me point out a couple of other things I think you guys should know. I covered Super Bowl 43 out in Tampa. I ran into Marv Levy over there. But you got to remember, though, Greg, those numbers are a little skewed because Kelly did play in the United States Football League where Marino played his entire career in the NFL. But hear me out, okay? I'll never forget, I'm over in Tampa covering obviously when Arizona took on Pittsburgh. Okay, I guess Mark's kind of like familiar with that area, when the Steelers beat the Cardinals. So I walk into an event where Marv Levy is there, and I'm talking to Coach Levy, and I said, Coach, I remember your wing T offense. And he said, you mean to tell me somebody remembers my wing T offense when he was in the Canadian Football League?
Yeah.
And he had a few other stops. So, yeah, I know all about it. Let me tell you something. If I had a camera phone at that time with Coach Levy, I would have had no trouble getting that. But he was impressed, and I knew about the wing T offense. And the thing you have to understand with Jim Kelly is obviously we know that he played for a pro-style coach in Howard Schnellenberger and was able to utilize those skills when he got to the USFL. So he actually got some pretty good playing time when he was with the United States Football League that led him into the Buffalo situation. But I'm glad you brought that piece of information. Now I want to get to Willis McGahee, the third Amigos here. Yes, once again, Buffalo Bills are getting a lot of airtime. So Bills Mafia, we're loading up on you today. But he was drafted in the first round, 23rd overall. He actually won a national championship in college in 2001 over Nebraska, and he did not collect a $2.5 million insurance policy when he was injured in the 2003 Fiesta Bowl. But get this, he tears the ACL, PCL, and MCL. He had several surgeries, extensive rehab. Now, in his college career, he rushed for 2,067 yards with 31 touchdowns. And in his professional career, Willis McGahee played for Buffalo from 2003 to 6, Baltimore Ravens 2007 to 10, Denver Broncos from 2011 12, and of course, Cleveland Browns finished up for a year at 2013. But here are the final numbers, okay, for Willis McGahee. He 8,474 yards, 65 rushing touchdowns, another dual threat running back, 1,339 receptions for 5 touchdowns as well. So there you have it, another multi-purpose back. You see that reoccurring thing with Miami Hurricanes running backs? They can catch the football, and they can certainly run it. We see that with Gore, and we see it with McGahee, and yes, they can survive major injury. Greg Fuchs, senior Miami correspondent here, give some takes on Willis McGahee.
Yeah, one of the first things that jumped out at me, if it wasn't for Frank Gore's first ACL injury, which caused him to miss the 2002 season, we may not have even ever heard of Willis McGahee, because that's the year he became a full-down running back, set Miami records, 1,753 yards, 28 touchdowns, over 100 yards in 10 games. Now, Miami Hurricanes have had a litany of great football players over the year. He may have had the single best season of anybody who's ever played at the U. He was that good that one year. And then he got hurt in the fourth quarter of the 2002 championship game, which every Cane fan knows they got robbed by that referee penalty in the end zone after Canes were already celebrating their national championship. And you talked about his NFL career. He missed his first season because of the injury. I don't think he ever got 100% healthy. I don't think he was ever as strong and fast as he was in college. But he still had a great NFL career. Gained over 1,000 yards, I think at least 4 times. His first year playing, he got 13 touchdowns. And, you mentioned like 8,500 yards almost. That's nothing to sneeze at, especially for a guy who had the severe knee injury that he had.
I mean, think about it. Here's a guy that got hurt and still managed 8,474 yards despite missing his season. My God. How much better can you do? How many guys even go ahead and rush for 7,000, 8,000 in career, let alone the fact that this guy was damaged goods when he got there, and yet he was able to salvage a halfway decent career. More power to Willis McGahee, right, Madman Mancini?
Well, you're right. It's impressive. I mean, I don't put it up there as about as impressive in 2004 as Adrian Peterson, who almost, I think, ran for 2,000 yards at Oklahoma. But it was impressive. But, I don't want to knock it. The injury was significant where we didn't see the real, Willis McGahee, what we saw at the U, coming into the pros. And I don't know, we see this so much with some of these guys that come into the, pros that dominate college. Case in point, maybe, when we look at Barry Sims could be in that same category. We didn't see a lot of him in the pros after he dominated in college and stuff. So I don't know, in Miami, such an impressive university, with college football and everything, Jimmy Johnson and the gang down there and stuff. But yeah, we didn't really get to see the Willie McGahee that we saw basically at the U in the pros with that significant injury.
Well, when people look at the Miami Hurricanes, they're always talking about the quarterbacks, but what few people realize is they produce a lot of good wide receivers.
Yeah, wide receiver, Michael Irvin. Yeah.
Well, right, but we're talking about wide receivers and running backs. So they always used to call it quarterback U. Well, you know what? Guess what? They spit out some good wide receivers. Brett Pearman was a guy that I remember. We talked about Michael Irvin, and the list goes on and on. We're not talking about
but Scott, for a long time, and you could tell the listeners, and I'm sure Greg will comment on this. There was a stretch there for a lot of years when you never saw Florida State, or a Miami school out of the top 10.
Oh, yeah. Well,
out of the top 10. It was totally dominated by those 3 schools.
Mark, I covered the Miami Hurricanes from 82 to 84, so I know well aware of it. I work with Howard Schnellenberger, okay? And then I followed Howard Schnellenberger to Florida Atlantic University, so I'm well aware of a program that the Hurricanes are. I mean, they were a quarterback factory is what they were, and then you sprinkle in some playmakers, and what do you have? 5 national championships. You have Larry.
Well, you've had a lot of good coaches down there too.
Well, Dennis Erickson was another coach
Yeah.
that continued the tradition. And so you had coaches, you had wide receivers, you had running backs, and more important, the quarterbacks. So,
Yeah.
and you
Bernie
have 5
Kosar.
national championships. Come on, Mark, really?
And don't forget all the tight ends that came out of University of Miami.
Yeah, name a few of those, Greg.
Well, you got Jeremy Shockey, you got Jimmy Graham. You got Kellen Winslow Jr.
That's a problem
Greg
with college
Olson,
football. That's a
Bubba
problem.
Franks.
Yeah.
And
I've always said that's a problem, guys, with college football. That if they had a playoff system back then, Miami would have won a lot more championships, I think.
Well, don't get me started what I think that's wrong with college football, because you don't have that much time to talk about it. We got another show following it. So.
Well, we should line up the field goal kickers and kick the NCAA right out of that stadium.
Yeah, okay. Don't hold your breath, Mark. Okay. I'll go ahead and tell you, when you have time to do an hour show, then we'll figure out the problems with the NCAA football and figure out the problems. And I'm not knocking your time because I know how busy that you are, but their problems are going to stem more than an hour, let me tell you. So.
Yeah. No, you're right.
But, so folks, just to give you a summary about what we've talked about tonight, I talked about the enduring Miami Hurricanes, Frank Gore, Jim Kelly, Willis McGahee, and yes, there's definitely a lot of tie-ins to the Buffalo Bills organization, Miami Hurricanes. So with that said, okay, we have Fire Up Wisconsin following the show here. So Greg Fuchs, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can find my articles on SouthFloridaTribune.com. And on Twitter, you can follow me at GFuchs, at Gregory Fuchs.
All right, Mark Mancini is going to join me again for Fire Up Wisconsin shortly. But why don't you let everybody know with this audience, Mark, how they can get a hold of you? We know that you have more podcasts, and I would probably nominate you for the Guinness Book of World Records. But why don't you spit out a few while you have a little bit of time?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm so blessed to do these, and it's not so much money comes and goes. I've always said building relationships. You two guys are unbelievable to work with each and every week we do this. I'm so blessed to be a part of XM Sirius 203-217, the Sports Byline, SB Nation, WWDB AM 860 Talk out of Philly, and then the Pittsburgh Pirate Podcast, which I do twice a week, and I'm so blessed and honored to do that.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, Mark, in the short time that I've really begun working with you, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. I enjoy doing the show on Saturdays that we look forward to with Bruce Kessinger. I think
that's a hoot. That
Weekly.
really is a hoot. Those listeners are knowledgeable.
Yeah, well, no, we have a lot of fun doing that, but I've enjoyed being on your Philadelphia show. I've also enjoyed being on Peter Blake's show last week, and the list goes on and on. Of course, now we have our own thing as well. So let me just go let everybody know how they get a hold of us, because we have a lot of ways to do it, okay? I want you to subscribe to the South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel. No cost to do it except that little use of the finger called subscribe, or visit us at www.southfloridatribune.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, if you want to email us with a lot of your love notes, suggestions, and those people that email us, we never know, you might be a candidate to come on the show. Feel free to do so at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. So on behalf of Greg Fuchs, Madman Mancini, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Fire Up Florida, enduring the Miami Hurricanes. Fire Up Wisconsin is next, so stay tuned. We'll be ready to roll as Candy Ebling and Eric Katz, myself, and Mark will rejoin you shortly. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.